Welcome, dear viewer, to a journey through time, a story from 66 million years ago, when the most magnificent creatures walked the earth. Tonight, we will explore how 99% of dinosaur species vanished, not in a single moment, but through powerful events that changed the planet forever. This is not only a story of endings, but of new beginnings, of how life always finds a way. As you settle into comfort, let your imagination wander back to an ancient world where giants roamed beneath alien skies. Our journey begins in the dawn of the Mesozoic Era, when the first dinosaurs took their steps into a world that would be theirs for more than 160 million years. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the ancient Earth come alive in your dreams. Chapter 1. The Dawn of the Mesozoic Era. 250 million years ago, our planet emerged from one of the most devastating mass extinctions in Earth's history. The Permian extinction had wiped away nearly 90% of all life, leaving behind a world ready for transformation. This marked the beginning of the Mesozoic Era, a time span that would last for over 180 million years. During this incredible period, dinosaurs would rise from humble beginnings to become the dominant life forms on Earth. The early Mesozoic world was vastly different from today. Pangaea, the massive supercontinent, was beginning to slowly drift apart. Climates were generally warmer and more humid than modern times, with no polar ice caps to regulate global temperatures. Vast deserts stretched across the continental interiors, while lush forests of conifers, ferns, and cycads thrived in coastal regions. In this recovering world, small archosaurs began to evolve new adaptations. These reptilian ancestors of dinosaurs developed improved hip structures, allowing them to walk more efficiently than their sprawling predecessors. Their legs moved directly beneath their bodies, providing better support and enabling faster movement. This evolutionary advantage would prove crucial in the coming millions of years. The stage was perfectly set for the rise of dinosaurs. With ecological niches left vacant by the Great Extinction, these early reptiles found opportunities everywhere. They began to diversify rapidly, adapting to various environments and food sources. Some remained small and nimble, while others grew larger to exploit new possibilities. The Mesozoic Era had begun, and with it, the greatest success story in vertebrate evolution was about to unfold across our ancient planet. Chapter 2. Triassic Beginnings. The Triassic period began approximately 250 million years ago, marking the first chapter of dinosaur evolution. During these early days, dinosaurs were not the giants we often imagine. Instead, they were small, agile creatures, typically no larger than a modern dog. These humble beginnings would eventually lead to the most successful group of land animals in Earth's history. Eoraptor, one of the earliest known dinosaurs, lived in what is now Argentina around 230 million years ago. This small predator measured only 3 feet in length and weighed about 22 pounds. Its lightweight build and bipedal stance gave it significant advantages over the bulkier reptiles of its time. Eoraptor possessed sharp teeth for catching small prey and swift legs for escaping larger predators. During the late Triassic, dinosaur diversity began to expand rapidly. Herrerasaurus emerged as a more formidable predator, reaching lengths of up to 20 feet. These early carnivores developed powerful jaws and razor-sharp claws, establishing the predatory template that would define theropod dinosaurs for millions of years to come. Plant-eating dinosaurs also appeared during this period. Plateosaurus represented one of the first successful herbivorous dinosaurs, growing up to 30 feet in length. These early sauropodomorphs could rear up on their hind legs to reach higher vegetation, an adaptation that would eventually lead to the massive long-necked giants of later periods. The Triassic world provided the perfect laboratory for dinosaur evolution. With relatively few competitors and abundant ecological opportunities, These early dinosaurs began to establish the foundations of their future dominance. Their superior locomotion, efficient metabolism, and adaptable body plans would soon propel them toward unprecedented evolutionary success across all continents. Chapter 3. Jurassic Prosperity. The Jurassic period, spanning from 201 million to 145 million years ago, represents the golden age of dinosaur evolution. During this time, dinosaurs achieved remarkable diversity and began their conquest of nearly every available ecological niche on Earth. The climate was warm and humid, creating ideal conditions for both plant and animal life to flourish. Massive sauropods dominated the Jurassic landscape. Brontosaurus, Diplodocus, and Brachiosaurus reached extraordinary sizes, with some species exceeding 100 feet in length and weighing up to 80 tons. These gentle giants developed long necks that allowed them to browse on treetop vegetation unavailable to other herbivores. Their enormous size provided protection from most predators, while their efficient digestive systems enabled them to extract nutrients from tough plant material. Predatory dinosaurs also reached new heights during the Jurassic. Allosaurus emerged as the apex predator, measuring up to 32 feet in length and weighing several tons. These powerful hunters possessed massive skulls filled with serrated teeth, perfect for slicing through flesh and bone. Their strong legs and balanced bodies made them efficient pursuit predators. The Jurassic seas teemed with marine reptiles, while pterosaurs ruled the skies. Plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs reached massive proportions, filling ecological roles similar to modern whales and dolphins. Meanwhile, pterosaurs diversified into numerous species, from small insect catchers to large fish eaters with wingspans exceeding 30 feet. Plant life also flourished during this period. Vast forests of conifers, tree ferns, and cycads covered much of the landscape, providing abundant food sources for herbivorous dinosaurs. This rich vegetation supported complex ecosystems that would sustain dinosaur prosperity for millions of years, setting the stage for even greater evolutionary achievements. Chapter 4. Cretaceous Dominance. The Cretaceous period, lasting from 145 million to 66 million years ago, witnessed dinosaurs reaching their absolute peak in terms of diversity, size, and global distribution. This final period of the Mesozoic Era saw dinosaurs evolving into their most spectacular and specialized forms, dominating every continent and ecological niche available to large terrestrial animals. Tyrannosaurus rex emerged as perhaps the most formidable land predator ever to walk the Earth. Standing 20 feet tall and measuring 40 feet in length, these apex predators possessed bone-crushing jaws capable of exerting forces exceeding 12,000 pounds per square inch. Their massive skulls housed brains sophisticated enough to coordinate complex hunting strategies, while their powerful legs could propel their 6-ton bodies at speeds approaching 25 miles per hour. Herbivorous dinosaurs also reached unprecedented diversity during the Cretaceous. Triceratops developed elaborate defensive features, including massive frilled skulls and 3 sharp horns for protection against predators. Parasaurolophus and other hadrosaurs evolved complex crest structures that functioned as resonating chambers, allowing herds to communicate across vast distances through low-frequency calls. The largest dinosaurs ever discovered lived during this period. Argentinosaurus may have reached lengths of 115 feet and weights exceeding 100 tons, making them among the largest land animals in Earth's history. These titanosaurs pushed the physical limits of terrestrial life, requiring sophisticated physiological adaptations to support their enormous bulk. Flowering plants revolutionized Cretaceous ecosystems, providing new food sources and creating more complex plant communities. This botanical revolution supported greater dinosaur diversity than ever before, with specialized species evolving to exploit specific plant resources. The world had truly become a dinosaur planet, with these magnificent creatures ruling supreme across all continents and environments. Chapter 5. Giants of the Land. The massive sauropod dinosaurs represent one of evolution's most remarkable achievements. These colossal herbivores, including Brontosaurus, Diplodocus, and Argentinosaurus, redefined the possibilities of terrestrial life. Their sheer size challenged the basic laws of physics and engineering, requiring extraordinary adaptations to survive and thrive in their ancient world. Sauropods possessed unique anatomical features that enabled their gigantic proportions. Their long necks, supported by lightweight vertebrae filled with air pockets, allowed them to reach vegetation up to 50 feet above the ground. This feeding strategy eliminated competition with smaller herbivores and provided access to nutrient-rich leaves at the forest canopy level. Their massive bodies housed enormous digestive systems capable of processing hundreds of pounds of plant material daily. These giants employed a 4-chambered digestive system similar to modern ruminants. Gastroliths, or stomach stones, helped grind tough plant fibers, while beneficial bacteria in their guts fermented cellulose into usable nutrients. This efficient digestive process enabled sauropods to extract maximum energy from low-quality vegetation, supporting their enormous metabolic requirements. Their cardiovascular systems represented marvels of biological engineering. Multi-chambered hearts pumped blood through vessels capable of withstanding extreme pressures required to circulate blood to their elevated heads. Some scientists theorize that larger sauropods possessed auxiliary hearts along their necks to assist with blood circulation. Social behavior played a crucial role in sauropod survival. Fossil evidence suggests these giants traveled in herds, providing protection through numbers. Young sauropods stayed close to adults, gaining protection from predators while learning essential feeding and migration patterns. Their thunderous footsteps could be heard for miles, serving as communication signals across vast distances and creating pathways that other animals would follow for generations. Chapter 6. Predators of the ancient world. The carnivorous dinosaurs, known as theropods, evolved into some of the most efficient predators ever to walk the Earth. From the small, agile Compsognathus to the massive Tyrannosaurus rex, these hunters developed diverse strategies and anatomical specializations that allowed them to dominate their ecosystems for over 160 million years. Tyrannosaurus rex stood as the ultimate apex predator of the late Cretaceous. Their massive skulls, measuring up to 5 feet in length, housed teeth as large as bananas with serrated edges, perfect for slicing through bone and flesh. Their powerful jaw muscles could generate bite forces exceeding the pressure exerted by modern crocodiles. Despite their enormous size, biomechanical studies suggest these predators could achieve running speeds of 20 miles per hour when pursuing prey. Smaller theropods like Velociraptor relied on speed, intelligence, and pack hunting strategies. These feathered predators possessed enlarged sickle-shaped claws on their feet, which they used to slash and hold onto struggling prey. Their relatively large brains enabled complex social behaviors and coordinated hunting tactics that allowed them to bring down animals many times their own size. Spinosaurus represented a unique adaptation among theropods, evolving semi-aquatic hunting strategies. Their elongated skulls and conical teeth were perfectly designed for catching fish, while their powerful forelimbs and webbed feet made them efficient swimmers. The distinctive sail on their backs may have served multiple functions, including thermoregulation and display purposes. These predators played crucial ecological roles beyond simply killing prey. They acted as population control mechanisms, preventing herbivore overgrazing and maintaining ecosystem balance. Their scavenging activities also helped recycle nutrients throughout their environments, supporting the complex food webs that characterized Mesozoic ecosystems and ensuring the continued prosperity of all dinosaur species. Chapter 7. Flying reptiles. While dinosaurs dominated the land, their cousins, the pterosaurs, conquered the ancient skies. These remarkable flying reptiles were not dinosaurs themselves, but they shared common archosaur ancestry and lived alongside dinosaurs throughout the Mesozoic era. Pterosaurs achieved powered flight millions of years before birds evolved, becoming the first vertebrates to master the aerial environment. Early pterosaurs like Pteranodon possessed wingspans reaching up to 23 feet, making them among the largest flying animals ever discovered. Their wings consisted of a flexible membrane stretched between an elongated fourth finger and their body, similar to modern bat wings but much larger in scale. This wing structure provided excellent lift and maneuverability, allowing them to soar effortlessly over vast distances. Quetzalcoatlus represented the pinnacle of pterosaur evolution, with wingspans potentially exceeding 36 feet and standing heights comparable to modern giraffes. These giants likely spent much of their time soaring at high altitudes, using thermal currents to maintain flight with minimal energy expenditure. Their massive beaks suggest they fed on large fish, carrion, or even small dinosaurs. Pterosaur anatomy revealed remarkable adaptations for flight. Their bones were hollow and lightweight, similar to modern birds, while maintaining sufficient strength to support their large wings. Many species possessed elaborate head crests that may have served as display structures, rudders for flight control, or resonating chambers for vocal communication. These flying reptiles occupied diverse ecological niches throughout the Mesozoic era. Some species were excellent fishers, diving into ancient seas to catch prey with their specialized beaks. Others were aerial hunters, pursuing insects and small vertebrates through dense forests. Their success in the air provided an additional dimension to Mesozoic ecosystems, creating complex three-dimensional food webs that connected terrestrial and aquatic environments. Chapter 8. Marine Monsters. The Mesozoic oceans harbored some of the most formidable predators in Earth's history. While dinosaurs ruled the land, massive marine reptiles dominated the seas. Plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, and ichthyosaurs evolved from terrestrial ancestors to become perfectly adapted oceanic hunters, filling ecological roles similar to modern whales, dolphins, and sharks. Plesiosaurs represented two distinct evolutionary strategies. Long-necked species like Elasmosaurus reached lengths of 46 feet, with necks comprising over half their total body length. These gentle giants used their serpentine necks to strike at schools of fish and small marine animals, while their massive bodies provided stability in turbulent waters. Short-necked pliosaurs like Leedsichthys evolved into apex predators, with skulls exceeding 8 feet in length and teeth the size of dinner plates. Mosasaurs were the ocean's ultimate predators during the late Cretaceous. Tylosaurus reached lengths of 50 feet and possessed powerful swimming abilities thanks to their shark-like tail fins and paddle-shaped limbs. Their massive jaws could unhinge like modern snakes, allowing them to swallow prey nearly as large as themselves. These marine lizards hunted everything from ammonites to smaller marine reptiles. Ichthyosaurs represented the most dolphin-like of the marine reptiles. Ophthalmosaurus possessed enormous eyes, the largest relative to body size of any known vertebrate, suggesting they were deep-diving specialists that hunted in the dark depths of ancient oceans. Their streamlined bodies and powerful tail flukes made them incredibly fast swimmers. These marine reptiles created complex oceanic ecosystems. Ammonites, with their coiled shells, served as important prey species, while massive schools of fish supported the entire marine food web. The success of these oceanic giants demonstrated that reptilian body plans could be successfully adapted to virtually any environment on Earth. Chapter 9. Dinosaur Societies. Contrary to popular depictions of dinosaurs as solitary creatures, mounting fossil evidence reveals that many species lived in complex social groups with sophisticated behavioral patterns. These ancient communities demonstrated remarkable intelligence, cooperation, and communication abilities that rivaled those of modern social mammals and birds. Maiasaura, whose name means good mother lizard, provided the first compelling evidence of dinosaur parental care. Fossil discoveries in Montana revealed nesting colonies where adults built mud nests approximately 6 feet in diameter. Parents brought food to their helpless hatchlings, which remained in the nest for several weeks after hatching. The discovery of multiple age groups at these sites suggests that Maiasaura lived in herds with extended family units. Triceratops and other ceratopsian dinosaurs formed massive herds that migrated seasonally across ancient landscapes. Fossil bone beds containing thousands of individuals suggest these herbivores traveled together for protection against predators, like Tyrannosaurus rex. Their elaborate frills and horns likely served dual purposes: defense against predators and visual communication within the herd during mating seasons and territorial disputes. Pack hunting behavior has been documented in several theropod species. Deinonychus fossils have been found in association with Tenontosaurus remains, suggesting coordinated group attacks on large herbivores. These intelligent predators possessed relatively large brains and forward-facing eyes that provided excellent depth perception for tracking prey and coordinating with pack members. Communication methods among dinosaurs included visual displays, vocalizations, and possibly even chemical signals. Parasaurolophus crests functioned as resonating chambers, producing low-frequency calls that could travel for miles through dense forests. These sophisticated communication networks allowed dinosaur communities to maintain social cohesion across vast territories, contributing to their remarkable success throughout the Mesozoic Era. Chapter 10. Global Ecosystems. By the middle of the Mesozoic Era, dinosaurs had successfully colonized every continent on Earth, creating interconnected global ecosystems of unprecedented complexity and diversity. These ancient environments supported intricate food webs that stretched from the smallest insects to the largest predators, demonstrating the remarkable adaptability and ecological success of dinosaurian life forms. The breakup of Pangaea during the Jurassic period created new oceanic barriers and climate patterns, leading to increased regional specialization among dinosaur populations. Different continents developed unique dinosaur assemblages adapted to local conditions. Africa's dinosaurs included massive sauropods like Paralititan, while Europe's islands supported dwarf species that evolved in isolation. South America became home to some of the largest predators, including Giganotosaurus and Carnotaurus. Mesozoic plant communities provided the foundation for these complex ecosystems. Coniferous forests dominated highland areas, while tree ferns and cycads flourished in lowland regions. The evolution of flowering plants during the Cretaceous period revolutionized terrestrial ecosystems, providing new food sources and creating more diverse habitats. These botanical changes supported even greater dinosaur diversity and specialization. Climate during the Mesozoic era remained generally warm and humid, with no polar ice caps and sea levels significantly higher than today. This greenhouse climate supported lush vegetation growth even at high latitudes, allowing dinosaurs to thrive in regions that would be frozen tundra in modern times. Seasonal migrations connected different climate zones, with massive herds following predictable patterns across continental landscapes. These global ecosystems represented the peak of reptilian evolution and diversity. Dinosaurs filled every conceivable ecological niche, from tiny insectivores to massive herbivores, from swift pursuit predators to patient ambush hunters. Their success created a stable world that would endure for over 100 million years, seemingly destined to continue indefinitely into the future. Chapter 11. Climate shifts begin. As the Cretaceous period progressed toward its final chapter, subtle but significant changes began to affect global climate systems. These environmental shifts, initially barely perceptible, would gradually intensify and contribute to the mounting pressures that dinosaur ecosystems would soon face. The stable greenhouse conditions that had supported dinosaur dominance for millions of years were slowly beginning to fluctuate. Ocean temperatures started to show irregular patterns around 70 million years ago. The warm tropical seas that had characterized much of the Mesozoic began experiencing occasional cooling episodes. These temperature variations affected marine ecosystems first, as plankton populations fluctuated in response to changing water temperatures. Marine food chains, which supported both oceanic reptiles and coastal dinosaur populations, began showing signs of instability. Atmospheric composition also began shifting during this period. Carbon dioxide levels, which had remained relatively stable throughout most of the Mesozoic, started showing more dramatic variations. These changes affected plant growth patterns and photosynthesis rates, creating the first hints of stress in the vast forests that supported herbivorous dinosaurs. Some plant species began declining in abundance, while others expanded their ranges. Precipitation patterns across different continents became less predictable. Regions that had enjoyed consistent rainfall for millions of years began experiencing drought conditions, while other areas faced increased flooding. These weather changes forced dinosaur populations to alter their traditional migration routes and feeding patterns, creating new competitive pressures between different species. The magnetic field surrounding Earth also began showing signs of instability. Periodic reversals and weakening episodes allowed increased cosmic radiation to reach the planet's surface, potentially affecting both climate patterns and biological processes. While these changes were gradual and often imperceptible to individual dinosaurs, they represented the beginning of environmental challenges that would test the remarkable adaptability that had made dinosaurs so successful. Chapter 12. Volcanic activity increases. Deep within the Earth, massive geological forces were stirring beneath the Indian subcontinent. The Deccan Traps, one of the largest volcanic formations in Earth's history, began forming through intense volcanic activity that would continue for hundreds of thousands of years. These volcanic eruptions released enormous quantities of lava, ash, and toxic gases into the atmosphere, beginning to alter global environmental conditions. Individual eruptions from the Deccan Traps were catastrophic events that could be seen and felt across vast distances. Lava flows covered thousands of square miles with each major eruption, destroying entire ecosystems and forcing dinosaur populations to migrate to safer regions. The sheer volume of molten rock produced by these eruptions was staggering, eventually covering an area larger than modern France with layers of basalt hundreds of feet thick. Volcanic gases posed an even greater threat than the lava flows themselves. Sulfur dioxide emissions created acid rain that poisoned vegetation and contaminated water sources across large regions. Carbon dioxide released by these eruptions contributed to greenhouse warming effects, while ash particles in the atmosphere began blocking sunlight and affecting photosynthesis rates in plant communities throughout Asia and beyond. The timing of these eruptions coincided with other environmental stresses that dinosaur ecosystems were beginning to experience. Climate instability combined with increased volcanic activity created a series of cascading effects throughout global food webs. Herbivorous dinosaurs faced declining plant resources, while carnivorous species struggled with reduced prey populations and contaminated territories. Despite these mounting challenges, dinosaur populations demonstrated remarkable resilience. Many species adapted their behaviors and migration patterns to avoid the most severely affected regions. However, the Deccan Traps represented only the beginning of a series of environmental catastrophes that would test the limits of dinosaurian adaptability. The volcanic activity continued intensifying, setting the stage for even greater challenges that lay ahead in the final chapters of the Mesozoic Era. Chapter 13. Sea levels fluctuate. Throughout the stable Mesozoic Era, sea levels had remained relatively high and consistent, creating vast, shallow seas that supported diverse marine ecosystems and provided stable coastal environments for terrestrial dinosaurs. However, as the Cretaceous period neared its end, these oceanic conditions began to change dramatically, causing widespread disruptions to established ecosystems and migration patterns. Global sea levels began dropping significantly around 70 million years ago, exposing previously submerged continental shelves and dramatically altering coastline configurations. These changes eliminated many shallow marine habitats that had supported abundant fish populations, which in turn affected coastal dinosaur species that depended on marine food sources. Pterosaurs and semi-aquatic dinosaurs faced particular challenges as their traditional feeding grounds disappeared. The retreat of shallow seas also connected previously isolated land masses, allowing dinosaur populations that had been separated for millions of years to come into contact with each other. This led to increased competition for resources and territorial conflicts as different species encountered unfamiliar competitors. Some dinosaur populations thrived in these new environments, while others struggled to adapt to the changing conditions. Temperature fluctuations accompanied these sea level changes as ocean currents that had remained stable for millions of years were disrupted by new continental configurations. These altered current patterns affected global climate regulation, leading to more extreme seasonal variations and unpredictable weather patterns. Dinosaur migration routes, which had followed established patterns for countless generations, became unreliable as environmental cues changed. Freshwater ecosystems also experienced significant impacts from these oceanic changes. Rivers and lakes that had maintained stable levels for millions of years began fluctuating dramatically, affecting drinking water supplies and aquatic food sources for terrestrial dinosaurs. Some regions experienced severe droughts, while others faced unprecedented flooding, as water redistribution patterns changed across the continents, creating additional stress on dinosaur populations already dealing with other environmental challenges. Chapter 14: Plant Life Evolution. The botanical revolution that occurred during the late Cretaceous fundamentally transformed terrestrial ecosystems and created new challenges for herbivorous dinosaurs. Flowering plants, or angiosperms, began rapidly diversifying and spreading across global landscapes, gradually displacing the conifers, ferns, and cycads that had dominated Mesozoic plant communities for over 100 million years. These new flowering plants possessed several advantages over their predecessors. They reproduced more efficiently through sophisticated pollination strategies involving insects, allowing them to colonize new territories rapidly. Their leaves were often more nutritious than conifer needles or fern fronds, but they also contained different chemical compounds that many dinosaurs had never encountered before. Some herbivorous species adapted successfully to these new food sources, while others struggled with digestive challenges. The rise of flowering plants created more complex forest structures with multiple canopy layers and diverse understory communities. This increased botanical diversity supported greater insect populations, which in turn affected small dinosaur species that depended on arthropods for protein. However, the changing plant communities also eliminated some traditional food sources that certain dinosaur species had relied upon for millions of years. Grasses began appearing during this period, though they remained relatively uncommon compared to later geological periods. These early grasslands created new habitat types that some dinosaur species began exploiting, particularly smaller herbivores that could efficiently process these tough, silica-rich plants. However, most large sauropods struggled with grass digestion and remained dependent on tree and shrub vegetation. Seasonal patterns also changed as flowering plants introduced new timing patterns for reproduction and growth. Many angiosperms concentrated their growing seasons differently than conifers, creating periods of abundance followed by resource scarcity. These changes forced herbivorous dinosaurs to modify their feeding strategies and migration patterns, adding another layer of complexity to ecosystems that were already experiencing stress from climate fluctuations and volcanic activity. Chapter 15. Atmospheric composition. The composition of Earth's atmosphere began undergoing significant changes during the final stages of the Cretaceous period. These alterations in the gaseous envelope surrounding our planet created subtle but far-reaching effects on climate, plant growth, and animal physiology. The stable atmospheric conditions that had supported dinosaur prosperity for millions of years were gradually shifting toward a new equilibrium. Oxygen levels, which had remained relatively high throughout most of the Mesozoic era, began showing fluctuations that affected both plant and animal life. These changes influenced the efficiency of respiratory systems in large dinosaurs, particularly those species that had evolved to take advantage of oxygen-rich environments. Some sauropods may have experienced reduced stamina and activity levels as atmospheric oxygen decreased in certain regions. Carbon dioxide concentrations continued varying in response to increased volcanic activity from sources like the Deccan Traps. These fluctuations created greenhouse effects that intensified global warming trends, but they also provided enhanced growing conditions for certain plant species. The complex interactions between carbon dioxide levels, temperature, and plant growth created unpredictable changes in food availability for herbivorous dinosaurs. Volcanic emissions introduced new atmospheric components that had been absent or minimal during earlier periods. Sulfur compounds created acid precipitation that damaged vegetation and contaminated water sources. These chemical changes affected soil composition and plant nutrition, creating cascading effects throughout terrestrial food webs. Some dinosaur populations began showing signs of nutritional stress as their food sources became less nutritious or more difficult to digest. Atmospheric pressure variations caused by changing weather patterns and temperature differences also began affecting dinosaur physiology. Species adapted to specific pressure ranges experienced stress when atmospheric conditions shifted outside their optimal ranges. These changes were gradual enough that many dinosaurs could adapt behaviorally, but they represented additional environmental pressures that were accumulating alongside other stressors affecting Mesozoic ecosystems during this critical transitional period. Chapter 16. Magnetic field changes Earth's. Magnetic field, which had provided stable protection against cosmic radiation throughout most of the Mesozoic era, began experiencing irregular fluctuations and periodic reversals during the late Cretaceous. These changes in the planet's invisible shield created new environmental stresses that affected both atmospheric chemistry and biological processes in ways that scientists are still working to fully understand. Magnetic field reversals, where the north and south magnetic poles essentially flip positions, became more frequent during this period. During these reversal events, Earth's magnetic protection could weaken significantly, allowing increased cosmic radiation to penetrate the atmosphere and reach the planet's surface. This enhanced radiation exposure affected both plant and animal life, potentially causing genetic mutations and disrupting normal biological processes. The weakened magnetic field also allowed more solar radiation to interact directly with atmospheric gases, creating chemical reactions that altered the composition of the air that dinosaurs breathed. These interactions produced increased levels of certain compounds while reducing others, creating subtle but persistent changes in atmospheric chemistry that affected respiratory efficiency and overall health in various dinosaur species. Navigation systems that some dinosaur species may have used for migration were also disrupted by these magnetic field changes. Modern research suggests that many animals possess magnetic sensors that help them navigate across long distances. If dinosaurs possessed similar abilities, the irregular magnetic field fluctuations would have made their traditional migration routes less reliable, forcing populations to find new pathways between seasonal feeding and breeding grounds. Cloud formation patterns were influenced by magnetic field variations, as cosmic radiation affects the nucleation processes that create water droplets in the atmosphere. These changes contributed to altered precipitation patterns and weather systems, adding another layer of environmental unpredictability to the challenges that dinosaur ecosystems were facing. The magnetic field instability represented yet another factor in the complex web of environmental changes that were gradually undermining the stability of the dinosaur world. Chapter 17. Solar radiation. Impact. Changes in solar radiation patterns, both from variations in the sun's output and alterations in Earth's protective magnetic field, began creating new environmental pressures on dinosaur ecosystems during the late Cretaceous period. These cosmic influences, operating on scales far beyond the immediate experience of individual dinosaurs, nevertheless produced tangible effects on climate, plant growth, and animal health across the planet. Increased ultraviolet radiation penetrated Earth's atmosphere as the magnetic field weakened and atmospheric composition changed. This enhanced UV exposure affected plant photosynthesis rates, with some species becoming more efficient, while others suffered reduced growth rates. The changing light conditions created shifts in forest composition and plant community structures that forced herbivorous dinosaurs to adapt their feeding strategies and habitat preferences. Solar radiation variations also influence global temperature patterns in complex ways. While increased greenhouse gases from volcanic activity trapped more heat in the atmosphere, variations in solar input created irregular heating patterns across different regions of the planet. These temperature fluctuations contributed to the climate instability that was making dinosaur migration patterns less predictable and reliable. Cosmic radiation from deep space, normally blocked by Earth's magnetic field, began reaching the surface in greater quantities during magnetic field reversal events. This radiation potentially affected genetic stability in both plants and animals, possibly contributing to increased mutation rates that could be either beneficial or harmful to species adaptation. Some dinosaur populations may have experienced enhanced genetic diversity, while others faced increased developmental problems. The cumulative effects of altered solar radiation patterns created additional stress on immune systems and reproductive success across various dinosaur species. These cosmic influences, combined with the terrestrial environmental changes already occurring, began testing the limits of dinosaurian adaptability. While many species continued thriving despite these challenges, the radiation changes represented another factor in the increasingly complex environmental equation that would ultimately determine the fate of the dinosaur world. Chapter 18. Ecosystem stress. The accumulation of environmental changes during the late Cretaceous began creating visible stress throughout dinosaur ecosystems. Multiple factors, including climate fluctuations, volcanic activity, changing plant communities, and atmospheric alterations, combined to produce systemic pressure on the intricate food webs that had supported dinosaur diversity for millions of years. These mounting challenges tested the resilience of established ecological relationships. Competition for resources intensified as environmental changes made traditional food sources less reliable. Herbivorous dinosaur species that had coexisted peacefully for millions of years found themselves competing for diminishing plant resources in certain regions. This increased competition led to territorial conflicts and forced some populations to expand into new areas where they encountered unfamiliar predators and environmental conditions. Predator-prey relationships began shifting as the abundance and distribution of various species changed in response to environmental pressures. Some carnivorous dinosaurs faced reduced prey availability as herbivore populations declined or relocated to different regions. This forced predators to alter their hunting strategies, expand their territorial ranges, or switch to alternative prey species, creating ripple effects throughout entire food webs. Disease transmission increased as dinosaur populations became stressed and concentrated in areas with remaining suitable habitat. Weakened immune systems made individuals more susceptible to pathogens, while crowded conditions facilitated the spread of infectious diseases, Some populations experienced significant mortality events that further destabilized local ecosystems and reduced genetic diversity within affected species. Reproductive success began declining in various dinosaur species as environmental stress affected breeding behaviors and parental care strategies. Nest sites became less reliable as climate patterns changed, while food scarcity during critical breeding seasons reduced hatching success and juvenile survival rates. These reproductive challenges threatened the long-term viability of some dinosaur populations, particularly those already facing other environmental pressures. The complex web of ecological relationships that had maintained dinosaur dominance was showing signs of strain as multiple stressors converged during this critical period. Chapter 19: Disease and Parasites. As environmental stresses mounted during the late Cretaceous, dinosaur populations became increasingly vulnerable to diseases and parasitic infections that had previously been kept in check by stable ecosystems and healthy immune systems. The combination of habitat loss, nutritional stress, and population crowding created ideal conditions for pathogens to spread through dinosaur communities with devastating efficiency. Parasitic infections likely increased as dinosaurs were forced to concentrate in remaining suitable habitats. Internal parasites such as worms and protozoans could spread rapidly through dense populations, particularly affecting young and elderly individuals whose immune systems were already compromised by environmental stress. These parasites weakened their hosts by competing for nutrients and damaging internal organs, reducing the dinosaur's ability to cope with other environmental challenges. Bacterial and viral diseases found new opportunities to spread as dinosaur social structures changed under environmental pressure. Species that had evolved complex social behaviors and close physical contact became particularly vulnerable to infectious diseases that could sweep through entire herds. Respiratory infections may have been especially problematic, as changing atmospheric conditions and increased dust from volcanic activity irritated dinosaur respiratory systems. Fungal infections also posed growing threats, as changing climate conditions created environments favorable for pathogenic fungi. Skin and respiratory tract infections could have become serious problems for dinosaurs already weakened by poor nutrition and environmental stress. These fungal diseases may have been particularly devastating in humid environments where spores could survive and spread efficiently between individuals. The lack of genetic diversity in some isolated dinosaur populations made them especially susceptible to diseases that their immune systems had never encountered. When populations that had been separated for long periods came into contact due to changing geography and climate, they potentially exchanged pathogens to which they had no resistance. These disease exchanges could have caused significant population crashes in vulnerable species, further destabilizing ecosystems that were already under severe environmental pressure. Chapter 20: Geological Instability. The final period of the Cretaceous era witnessed increased geological activity that created additional challenges for dinosaur populations already struggling with climate change and ecosystem disruption. Tectonic forces deep within the Earth began generating more frequent earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and landscape changes that transformed familiar habitats and migration routes that dinosaurs had used for millions of years. Mountain building processes accelerated in various regions, creating new geographic barriers that separated dinosaur populations and altered weather patterns. The Rocky Mountains and other major mountain ranges were rising during this period, changing precipitation patterns and creating rain shadows that turned previously lush regions into arid landscapes. These geographic changes forced dinosaur populations to adapt to new environmental conditions or migrate to more suitable areas. Increased seismic activity made traditional nesting sites unreliable for many dinosaur species. Ground instability could destroy carefully constructed nests and disrupt breeding colonies that had been established for generations. Some species may have been forced to abandon optimal nesting locations in favor of geologically stable areas that were less suitable for reproduction and raising young. Landslides and rockfalls became more common as tectonic activity increased, blocking river valleys and altering water flow patterns. These changes affected freshwater availability and created new barriers to dinosaur movement. Some populations became isolated by geological changes, reducing genetic diversity and making them more vulnerable to other environmental stresses. The combination of geological instability with other environmental pressures created a cascade of challenges that tested dinosaurian adaptability to its limits. While many species demonstrated remarkable resilience in adapting to these changing conditions, the cumulative stress was beginning to overwhelm the ecological systems that had supported dinosaur dominance for so many millions of years. Chapter 21. A Rock from Space. Deep in the cold darkness of space, far beyond the orbit of Mars, a massive chunk of rock and metal drifted silently through the void. This asteroid, measuring approximately 6 miles in diameter, had been traveling through the solar system for millions of years, following an elliptical orbit that occasionally brought it closer to the inner planets. Its surface was scarred by countless impacts from smaller meteoroids, creating a rugged, cratered landscape that bore witness to billions of years of cosmic bombardment. The asteroid was composed primarily of rocky materials mixed with metallic elements, including iron and nickel. Its density and composition made it an incredibly destructive projectile, containing kinetic energy equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons when traveling at cosmic velocities. The rock had formed during the early days of the solar system, when planetary formation was still in progress, and debris from this cosmic construction project continued orbiting the Sun. For countless eons, this celestial wanderer had posed no threat to Earth or its inhabitants. Its orbit had remained stable and predictable, carrying it safely past the inner planets on regular intervals. However, gravitational influences from Jupiter and other massive bodies in the solar system occasionally altered the paths of such asteroids, sometimes sending them on collision courses with terrestrial planets. The asteroid showed no awareness of the thriving world it would eventually encounter. On Earth, millions of dinosaur species continued their daily activities, unaware that their fate was approaching from the depths of space. Tyrannosaurus rex hunted in ancient forests, while massive sauropod herds migrated across continents that would soon be transformed forever. This cosmic projectile carried within its rocky mass the power to end an era that had lasted for over 160 million years, though neither the asteroid nor its eventual target had any knowledge of the catastrophic encounter that lay ahead. Chapter 22. Asteroid Belt Origins. The asteroid that would ultimately end the age of dinosaurs originated in the asteroid belt, a region of space located between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, where countless rocky fragments orbit the Sun. This cosmic debris field contains millions of objects ranging from tiny pebbles to massive rocks hundreds of miles in diameter, representing leftover material from the formation of our solar system approximately 4.5 billion years ago. During the early stages of planetary formation, gravitational forces caused dust and gas to condense into larger and larger clumps of material. Most of these accumulations eventually formed the planets we know today, but the region between Mars and Jupiter remained cluttered with rocky debris that never quite managed to coalesce into a single planetary body. Jupiter's massive gravitational influence prevented these fragments from combining, instead keeping them in perpetual orbit around the Sun. The asteroid belt contains objects with diverse compositions, reflecting the varied materials that were present during the solar system's formation. Some asteroids consist primarily of rocky materials similar to terrestrial planets, while others contain significant amounts of metallic elements like iron and nickel. Still others are composed of carbon-rich materials that may have contained water ice and organic compounds when they first formed. Gravitational interactions between asteroids occasionally alter their orbits, sometimes sending them on trajectories that intersect with the paths of planets. Jupiter's immense gravitational field acts as both protector and destroyer, deflecting some potentially dangerous asteroids away from the inner solar system while simultaneously redirecting others toward Earth and its neighboring planets. The particular asteroid destined to strike Earth had spent millions of years in the asteroid belt, slowly accumulating cosmic dust and weathering from micrometeorite impacts. Its journey from this distant realm to Earth would take considerable time, during which dinosaurs continued evolving and thriving, completely unaware of the approaching cosmic catastrophe. Chapter 23: Gravitational Encounters. The trajectory of the Earth-bound asteroid was not predetermined from its formation. Instead, a series of gravitational encounters with planets and other massive objects gradually altered its orbit over millions of years, eventually setting it on a collision course with our planet. These cosmic interactions demonstrate how seemingly random events in space can have profound consequences for life on Earth. Jupiter, the solar system's largest planet, played a crucial role in redirecting the asteroid toward the inner solar system. As the massive gas giant orbited the Sun, its gravitational field periodically influenced asteroids passing nearby. Most of these encounters simply altered asteroid orbits slightly, but occasionally, Jupiter's gravity would provide enough energy to send an asteroid into a drastically different trajectory. During one such encounter, Jupiter's gravitational pull accelerated the future Earth killer, giving it additional velocity while simultaneously altering its orbital path. This gravitational assist, similar to techniques used by modern spacecraft to reach distant destinations, provided the energy necessary to escape the asteroid belt's gravitational constraints and begin a journey toward the inner solar system. Mars also contributed to the asteroid's trajectory modification through several close encounters over millions of years. Although much smaller than Jupiter, Mars' gravitational influence was sufficient to fine-tune the asteroid's path, making small but significant adjustments to its orbit. These minor course corrections gradually steered the space rock toward an inevitable rendezvous with Earth. The gravitational dance between planets, asteroids, and other solar system objects continues constantly, with most interactions producing no significant changes. However, the specific combination of encounters experienced by this particular asteroid created a perfect storm of orbital mechanics that would ultimately seal the fate of the dinosaurs and reshape life on Earth forever. Chapter 24: Size and Composition. The asteroid approaching Earth was a formidable cosmic projectile, measuring approximately 6 miles in diameter and containing an estimated mass of several trillion tons. To put this enormous size in perspective, the asteroid was larger than Mount Everest and contained more rock and metal than many mountain ranges on Earth. Its immense bulk would prove crucial to the devastating effects it would produce upon impact. Spectroscopic analysis of similar asteroids suggests that the Chicxulub impactor, as it would later be known, consisted primarily of carbonaceous chondrite material. This composition included rocky minerals mixed with metallic elements, particularly iron and nickel, which gave the asteroid tremendous density and structural integrity. The presence of these heavy metals would contribute significantly to the destruction caused by the eventual impact. The asteroid's surface was heavily cratered from billions of years of collisions with smaller meteoroids during its long journey through space. These impact scars created an irregular, pockmarked exterior that would affect how the asteroid interacted with Earth's atmosphere during its final approach. The rough surface would generate additional heat and turbulence as atmospheric friction began affecting the incoming projectile. Within its massive bulk, the asteroid contained enough kinetic energy to release forces equivalent to several billion nuclear weapons upon impact. This energy was proportional to both its enormous mass and its tremendous velocity, creating a combination that would prove absolutely catastrophic for Earth's existing ecosystems. The asteroid's composition also included trace amounts of rare elements, that would be scattered across the globe following impact. The sheer physical dimensions of this cosmic missile meant that atmospheric friction would have minimal effect on slowing its approach. Unlike smaller meteoroids that burn up completely in Earth's atmosphere, this massive object would retain most of its original size and velocity all the way to the surface, ensuring maximum destructive potential upon collision. Chapter 25. Trajectory calculations. Modern computational models have allowed scientists to reconstruct the precise trajectory that carried the Chicxulub asteroid from the depths of space to its fateful collision with Earth. These calculations reveal that the asteroid approached from the southeast at an angle of approximately 20 to 30 degrees from vertical, a trajectory that would maximize the devastation caused by the eventual impact. The asteroid's approach angle was particularly unfortunate for life on Earth. A more vertical impact would have created a deeper crater with more limited global effects, while a more horizontal approach might have caused the asteroid to skip off Earth's atmosphere like a stone across water. Instead, the 20 to 30 degree angle ensured maximum energy transfer to Earth's crust and atmosphere, creating optimal conditions for worldwide devastation. Velocity calculations indicate that the asteroid was traveling at approximately 12 miles per second, or about 27,000 miles per hour, when it entered Earth's atmosphere. This enormous speed was the result of Earth's gravitational acceleration combined with the asteroid's original orbital velocity. The tremendous kinetic energy generated by this velocity would be released instantaneously upon impact, creating forces beyond anything previously experienced in Earth's history. The asteroid's trajectory carried it over the Gulf of Mexico before impact, meaning that its final approach occurred over water. This path would have been visible from much of North America, appearing as an intensely bright fireball streaking across the sky. Any dinosaurs that happened to be looking in the right direction would have witnessed a sight brighter than the sun itself, rapidly growing larger as it approached. Mathematical models suggest that the entire atmospheric transit phase, from first contact with the upper atmosphere to surface impact, lasted only a few seconds. This brief time span was insufficient for any significant atmospheric braking, ensuring that the asteroid retained nearly all of its cosmic velocity upon collision with the shallow seafloor of the Yucatan Peninsula. Chapter 26. Speed and Energy. The kinetic energy carried by the approaching asteroid represented one of the most concentrated releases of power in Earth's history. Traveling at approximately 12 miles per second, this cosmic projectile possessed kinetic energy equivalent to roughly 100 million megatons of TNT, or about 2 million times more powerful than the most destructive nuclear weapons ever created by humans. To understand the magnitude of this energy release, consider that the asteroid's impact would generate forces exceeding all of Earth's earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and storms combined over thousands of years, released in a single instant. This tremendous energy concentration would be sufficient to vaporize the asteroid itself, along with massive quantities of target rock, creating a fireball that would briefly rival the temperature of the sun's surface. The relationship between the asteroid's mass and velocity followed the fundamental physics equation for kinetic energy, where energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. This mathematical relationship meant that the asteroid's enormous velocity was even more important than its massive size in determining the total energy release. Even a smaller asteroid traveling at similar speeds would have caused global catastrophe. As the asteroid approached Earth, its tremendous speed meant that gravitational acceleration from our planet had relatively little effect on its total velocity. Earth's gravity did provide some additional acceleration during the final approach, but the asteroid was already traveling so fast that this gravitational contribution represented only a small percentage increase in its overall kinetic energy. The conversion of this kinetic energy into heat, light, and mechanical force would occur virtually instantaneously upon impact, creating conditions that would immediately vaporize everything within hundreds of miles of ground zero. The energy release would be so intense that its effects would be felt globally within hours of the collision, beginning a cascade of events that would transform Earth forever. Chapter 27. Final Approach. During its final journey through the solar system, the asteroid that would end the age of dinosaurs spent several years crossing the orbit of Mars and entering the inner solar system. As it approached Earth, the space rock accelerated under the influence of our planet's gravitational field, gaining additional speed that would contribute to the ultimate devastation of the impact event. The asteroid's final approach carried it through the zone of space where Earth's gravitational influence became dominant over the Sun's pull. During this phase, our planet's gravity began bending the asteroid's trajectory, ensuring that what might have been a near miss became instead a direct collision course. The precise timing and positioning required for this encounter represented an astronomical coincidence of devastating proportions. As the asteroid drew closer to Earth, it began encountering increasing concentrations of space dust and debris in our planet's vicinity. These encounters created tiny flashes of light as particles struck the asteroid's surface at tremendous speeds, though these impacts were insignificant compared to the cosmic projectile's enormous bulk and velocity. Any observers with sufficiently powerful telescopes would have detected the asteroid as a rapidly brightening point of light. During the final weeks before impact, the asteroid passed through the orbits of Earth's artificial satellites, though these human-made objects would not exist for another 65 million years. The space rock continued its relentless approach, guided by the inexorable laws of physics, toward a collision that would reshape the history of life on our planet. Throughout this final approach phase, life on Earth continued normally. Dinosaur herds migrated across ancient continents, predators hunted their prey, and marine reptiles swam through prehistoric seas, all completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. The cosmic destroyer approached in silence, carrying within its rocky mass the power to end an era that had lasted for over 160 million years. Chapter 28. Atmospheric Entry. The moment when the asteroid first encountered Earth's upper atmosphere marked the beginning of the final phase of its cosmic journey. At an altitude of approximately 75 miles above the surface, the space rock began interacting with the tenuous gases of Earth's exosphere, creating the first signs of atmospheric friction that would accompany its final descent to the surface. As the asteroid plunged deeper into the atmosphere, friction with increasingly dense air began generating tremendous heat across its surface. The rocky projectile's enormous velocity meant that atmospheric molecules struck its leading surface with incredible force, creating temperatures exceeding those found in stellar cores. This intense heating began vaporizing the asteroid's surface layers, creating a brilliant plasma trail that stretched across the sky. The atmospheric entry created a spectacular visual display that would have been visible across much of North America. The superheated plasma surrounding the asteroid glowed brighter than the sun, creating a fireball that illuminated the landscape below in brilliant white light. The ionized gases in the asteroid's wake formed a luminous trail that persisted for several minutes after the impact, serving as a cosmic signature of the catastrophic event. Atmospheric compression ahead of the rapidly moving asteroid created powerful shock waves that propagated through the air at supersonic speeds. These pressure waves generated tremendous thunder that could be heard hundreds of miles away, providing an acoustic warning of the approaching disaster. However, the brief duration of the atmospheric transit meant that most potential observers had only seconds to witness the cosmic spectacle. Despite the intense atmospheric friction, the asteroid's enormous mass and velocity meant that it lost relatively little material during its brief passage through Earth's atmosphere. The vast majority of the cosmic projectile remained intact throughout the entry phase, ensuring that nearly its full destructive potential would be delivered to the surface upon impact. Chapter 31. Ground Zero Impact. At precisely the moment of collision, the 6-mile-wide asteroid struck the shallow waters of the Yucatan Peninsula with a force that defied comprehension. The impact occurred at approximately 27,000 miles per hour, instantly releasing energy equivalent to 100 million megatons of TNT. In that singular moment, the kinetic energy of millions of years of cosmic travel was converted into heat, light, and mechanical force that would reshape the planet forever. The initial contact between asteroid and Earth lasted only microseconds, but during this brief instant, temperatures at the impact site exceeded 100,000 degrees Fahrenheit. These extreme conditions instantly vaporized the entire asteroid along with massive quantities of limestone bedrock, creating a superheated plasma fireball that expanded outward at incredible velocities. The collision generated pressures millions of times greater than atmospheric pressure, crushing and melting everything within hundreds of miles of ground zero. The impact site experienced conditions more extreme than those found in the core of nuclear explosions. Rock that had remained solid for millions of years was instantly transformed into vapor and molten droplets that were hurled high into the atmosphere. The tremendous forces involved excavated a crater that would eventually measure 120 miles in diameter, removing entire mountain ranges worth of material in seconds. Seismic waves radiating outward from the impact reached magnitudes far exceeding any earthquake in recorded history. These shock waves traveled through Earth's crust at speeds of several miles per second, carrying devastating energy to every corner of the planet. The ground itself became a liquid medium, with solid rock behaving like water under the extreme forces generated by the cosmic collision. Within the first few seconds after impact, a column of vaporized rock and superheated gases began rising into the atmosphere, carrying with it the scattered remains of the asteroid and countless tons of terrestrial material. This expanding plume would soon reach heights exceeding 60 miles, injecting debris into the upper atmosphere, where it would begin affecting global climate systems and blocking sunlight from reaching Earth's surface. Chapter 32. Crater Formation. The excavation of the Chicxulub crater represented one of the most violent geological events in Earth's history. The asteroid's tremendous impact energy carved through layers of sedimentary rock that had accumulated over millions of years, penetrating deep into the planet's crust and creating a wound in the Earth that would remain visible for geological ages to come. The crater formation process occurred in distinct phases, each lasting only seconds, but accomplishing geological work that would normally require millions of years. During the initial contact phase, the asteroid and target rock were compressed to incredible densities before rebounding explosively outward. This compression and expansion created the characteristic bowl shape of impact craters, with a raised rim formed by material ejected from the excavation site. The transient crater, formed within the first 30 seconds after impact, measured approximately 60 miles in diameter and 20 miles in depth. However, the enormous size and energy of this impact created conditions that caused the crater walls to collapse almost immediately, creating complex terraced structures and a central peak that rose from the crater floor like a mountain emerging from the depths. Massive quantities of fractured and melted rock filled the crater during the collapse phase, creating breccia formations that mixed local limestone with shocked minerals and droplets of asteroid material. These impact breccias would serve as geological markers of the catastrophic event, preserving evidence of the extreme conditions that existed during those first moments after collision. The final crater structure, once the immediate chaos had settled, measured 120 miles in diameter with multiple concentric rings of fractured and uplifted rock. The center of the crater contained a peak ring approximately 50 miles in diameter, formed when the initial central peak collapsed under its own weight and the continued effects of seismic activity. This massive scar on Earth's surface would eventually be buried beneath millions of years of sedimentary deposits, but its gravitational signature would remain detectable allowing future scientists to locate and study the impact site. The crater's formation marked the permanent transformation of a region that had been peaceful ocean floor into a monument to cosmic violence. Chapter 33. Shockwave propagation. The seismic energy released by the asteroid impact propagated through Earth's crust as shock waves of unprecedented magnitude, traveling at velocities exceeding 4 miles per second and carrying devastating force to every corner of the planet. These waves represented the most powerful seismic event in Earth's recent geological history, exceeding the combined energy of thousands of major earthquakes occurring simultaneously. The primary shock waves radiated outward from the impact site in all directions, following the curvature of the Earth and maintaining their destructive power across vast distances. Within minutes of the impact, these seismic waves reached the eastern coast of North America, triggering massive landslides, collapsing cliff faces, and creating surface ruptures that extended for hundreds of miles across the continental landscape. As the shock waves traveled through different geological formations, they were reflected, refracted, and amplified by changes in rock density and composition. Mountain ranges acted as seismic focusing mechanisms, concentrating wave energy and creating zones of particularly intense ground motion. Sedimentary basins experienced prolonged shaking as slower-moving surface waves continued reverberating long after the initial shock had passed. The global propagation of these seismic waves created earthquake conditions across every continent within hours of the impact. Dinosaur populations thousands of miles from ground zero experienced violent ground shaking that toppled trees, triggered avalanches, and opened massive fissures in the Earth's surface. Many animals were killed or injured directly by these seismic effects before the atmospheric consequences of the impact had time to develop. Ocean floors experienced particularly severe effects as the shock waves traveled through the denser crustal rocks beneath the seas. Underwater landslides and seafloor ruptures were triggered across multiple ocean basins, displacing enormous volumes of water and contributing to the generation of massive tsunami waves. These seismic effects represented only the beginning of the global catastrophe, as the atmospheric and climatic consequences of the impact were still developing in the skies above the devastated planet. Chapter 34. Mega tsunamis. The asteroid impact in the shallow waters of the Gulf of Mexico instantly displaced enormous volumes of seawater, creating tsunami waves of unprecedented size and destructive power. These mega tsunamis dwarfed any waves in recorded history, with initial wave heights exceeding 1,000 feet near the impact site and maintaining devastating force as they spread across ocean basins to distant coastlines. The mechanism of tsunami generation was both instantaneous and catastrophic. The asteroid's impact excavated millions of tons of seafloor material while simultaneously vaporizing vast quantities of seawater. The resulting cavity was immediately filled by surrounding water masses, creating a massive displacement that propagated outward as concentric rings of towering waves traveling at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. These colossal waves maintained their destructive energy across vast distances due to their enormous wavelengths and the deep ocean basins through which they traveled. As they approached shallow coastal waters, the waves slowed but increased dramatically in height, creating walls of water that could exceed 300 feet when they finally reached shorelines thousands of miles from the impact site. The first mega tsunami waves reached the eastern coast of North America within hours of the impact, devastating coastal ecosystems and penetrating hundreds of miles inland. River valleys channeled the rushing water deep into continental interiors, destroying forests and wiping out dinosaur populations that had never experienced oceanic flooding. The backwash from these waves carried enormous quantities of terrestrial debris back to the oceans. Similar tsunami effects occurred across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans as the waves spread globally. Coastal regions of Europe, Africa, and Asia experienced unprecedented flooding as waves exceeding 100 feet in height inundated low-lying areas. These mega tsunamis represented one of the first global effects of the impact, bringing immediate destruction to marine and coastal ecosystems while the atmospheric consequences were still developing. The sedimentary deposits left by these waves would serve as geological evidence of the catastrophe for millions of years to come. Chapter 35. Ejecta Blanket. The tremendous force of the asteroid impact launched countless tons of vaporized and molten material high into Earth's atmosphere, creating an ejecta blanket that would eventually circle the globe and rain down destruction over vast areas. This airborne debris consisted of shocked minerals, glass spherules, and droplets of melted rock that had been superheated to temperatures exceeding those found in volcanic eruptions. The initial ejecta plume rose to heights exceeding 60 miles above Earth's surface, carrying material well beyond the normal limits of the atmosphere and into the realm of space itself. Some of this debris achieved sufficient velocity to escape Earth's gravitational field entirely, while other particles followed ballistic trajectories that would bring them back to the surface hundreds or thousands of miles from the impact site. The composition of the ejecta blanket included shocked quartz crystals that could only form under the extreme pressures generated by cosmic impacts. These microscopic minerals, along with tiny glass spherules created by the rapid cooling of molten rock droplets, would serve as distinctive markers of the impact event in geological layers worldwide. The debris also contained trace amounts of platinum and other rare elements characteristic of asteroid composition. As the ejecta particles re-entered Earth's atmosphere at high velocities, they generated tremendous heat through friction with air molecules. This atmospheric heating created a global fireball effect that raised surface temperatures to lethal levels across much of the planet. The incoming debris glowed like countless meteors, turning the sky into a blazing canopy that ignited wildfires and killed exposed organisms through thermal radiation. The heaviest ejecta particles fell back to Earth first, creating a blanket of impact debris that covered areas within several hundred miles of the impact site. Lighter particles remained airborne for longer periods, eventually settling out of the atmosphere over weeks and months to create the thin clay layer that marks the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary in rock formations worldwide. This global ejecta layer would serve as permanent evidence of the day when cosmic debris rained down upon the Earth. Chapter 36. Global Firestorms. The superheated ejecta particles raining down from the impact plume ignited spontaneous fires across vast areas of the planet's surface. These thermal pulses, created by friction heating of debris re-entering the atmosphere, raised temperatures to levels sufficient to ignite vegetation, starting continental-scale wildfires that would consume entire ecosystems and contribute massive quantities of smoke and ash to the already polluted atmosphere. The global firestorm began within hours of the impact as the first wave of ballistic ejecta completed their atmospheric trajectories and returned to Earth's surface. The thermal radiation from these glowing particles was intense enough to kill exposed organisms directly, while also providing the ignition energy necessary to start fires in dry vegetation. Wind patterns and atmospheric circulation carried burning debris across continental boundaries, spreading the conflagration to regions that had not experienced direct thermal effects. Forests that had grown undisturbed for millions of years became fuel for fires of unprecedented scale and intensity. Coniferous forests proved particularly susceptible to ignition, with their resin-rich wood and needle-covered floors providing abundant combustible material. These forest fires generated their own weather patterns, creating fire tornadoes and generating massive convection columns that carried smoke and ash high into the atmosphere. The fires consumed not only living vegetation but also accumulated organic matter in soils, releasing stored carbon that had been sequestered over thousands of years. This combustion added enormous quantities of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, while simultaneously destroying the photosynthetic capacity of plant communities that would normally absorb atmospheric carbon. The resulting disruption of the carbon cycle would have long-lasting effects on global climate. Smoke from the global firestorms combined with dust and debris from the impact itself to create an atmospheric pollution load far exceeding anything in Earth's previous history. The particulate matter blocked sunlight from reaching the surface, while the chemical byproducts of combustion created acid precipitation that would persist for months after the initial fires had burned themselves out. These atmospheric effects marked the beginning of the prolonged environmental catastrophe that would follow the impact event. Chapter 37: Atmospheric Disruption. The massive injection of vaporized rock, water, and debris into Earth's atmosphere created unprecedented disruption of global air circulation patterns and atmospheric chemistry. The impact had launched millions of tons of material into the stratosphere and beyond, fundamentally altering the composition and behavior of the gaseous envelope surrounding our planet. The immediate atmospheric effects included the formation of a global dust cloud that began blocking sunlight within hours of the impact. This dust consisted of pulverized rock from both the asteroid and target site, along with soot particles from the worldwide fires that had been ignited by thermal radiation from re-entering ejecta. The combination created atmospheric opacity levels that reduced surface illumination to twilight conditions even during what should have been midday hours. Sulfur compounds vaporized from the limestone bedrock at the impact site reacted with atmospheric water vapor to form sulfuric acid droplets that created acid rain of devastating intensity. These chemical reactions occurred high in the atmosphere, where the sulfur dioxide could persist for months before eventually precipitating as highly acidic rainfall that killed vegetation and contaminated freshwater supplies across the globe. The injection of superheated water vapor into the upper atmosphere created temporary greenhouse effects that raised global temperatures even as particulate matter was blocking sunlight. This complex interaction between heating and cooling mechanisms created chaotic weather patterns with extreme temperature fluctuations, violent storms, and unpredictable precipitation that made survival difficult for the remaining plant and animal life. Atmospheric pressure waves generated by the impact traveled around the globe multiple times, creating unusual wind patterns and pressure variations that persisted for weeks after the initial event. These pressure changes affected the breathing and physiology of surviving organisms, while the altered wind patterns disrupted normal weather systems and seasonal cycles that many species depended upon for migration and reproduction. The atmosphere itself had become a hostile environment, contributing to the cascade of effects that would ultimately drive most dinosaur species to extinction. Chapter 38: Dust and Debris Clouds. The massive quantities of pulverized rock and debris launched into the atmosphere by the asteroid impact created a global dust cloud that would persist for months, fundamentally altering Earth's climate and environmental conditions. This airborne blanket of particles effectively blocked sunlight from reaching the planet's surface, initiating a prolonged period of darkness and cold that would become known as impact winter. The dust cloud consisted of several distinct components, each with different atmospheric behaviors and residence times. Fine clay particles and shocked mineral grains could remain suspended in the atmosphere for months, while larger debris settled out more quickly. The smallest particles, measuring less than 1 micrometer in diameter, were particularly effective at scattering and absorbing incoming solar radiation, creating maximum cooling effects at Earth's surface. Global atmospheric circulation patterns distributed the dust cloud around the entire planet within weeks of the impact. The high-altitude injection of debris allowed particles to spread far beyond normal weather systems, reaching both polar regions and creating truly worldwide atmospheric effects. Satellite measurements, had they existed, would have shown a uniform grey haze covering the entire planet. The optical density of the dust cloud was sufficient to reduce surface light levels to less than 1% of normal solar illumination. This extreme reduction in available light made photosynthesis impossible for most plant species, effectively shutting down the base of terrestrial food webs. Marine ecosystems experienced similar effects as dust particles settled onto ocean surfaces, reducing light penetration and affecting phytoplankton populations. Temperature effects from the dust cloud were rapid and severe. Surface temperatures dropped by an estimated 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit within weeks of the impact, creating near-freezing conditions even in tropical regions that had previously enjoyed warm, stable climates. This sudden cooling caught organisms adapted to greenhouse conditions completely unprepared, contributing significantly to the mass extinction that was already underway. The dust cloud represented a prolonged environmental catastrophe that would persist long after the immediate effects of the impact had subsided. Chapter 39. Earthquake. Cascades. The seismic energy released by the asteroid impact triggered a cascade of secondary earthquakes around the globe as the initial shock waves interacted with existing geological stresses and fault systems. This seismic activation created a prolonged period of crustal instability that would continue for months after the primary impact, causing widespread destruction and habitat disruption across all continents. The initial impact generated seismic waves with magnitudes estimated at 10 to 11 on the Richter scale, far exceeding any earthquake in recorded history. As these waves propagated through Earth's crust, they encountered existing fault lines and zones of geological weakness that had been slowly accumulating stress over thousands of years. The passage of the impact-generated waves provided the additional energy needed to trigger rupture along these dormant fault systems. The Yellowstone region experienced particularly severe secondary seismic activity as the shock waves interacted with the underlying volcanic system. Similar effects occurred along the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean, where numerous volcanoes and fault systems were activated by the seismic energy. The cascade of earthquakes created a feedback effect, with each subsequent earthquake potentially triggering additional seismic events in connected geological systems. Mountain ranges around the world experienced massive landslides and rockfalls as the repeated seismic shaking destabilized slopes that had remained stable for millions of years. These mass-wasting events blocked river valleys, created temporary lakes, and permanently altered drainage patterns across entire watersheds. Many dinosaur populations found their traditional migration routes blocked by these geological changes. The prolonged seismic activity made it difficult for surviving organisms to find safe shelter or establish stable territories in the aftermath of the impact. Ground that had been solid and reliable for millions of years became unpredictable and dangerous, with the constant threat of additional earthquakes making recovery efforts nearly impossible. The earthquake cascade represented yet another factor in the complex web of environmental changes that would ultimately drive the majority of dinosaur species to extinction. Chapter 40. Volcanic eruptions. The tremendous seismic energy generated by the asteroid impact provided the trigger needed to activate volcanic systems around the globe that had been building pressure for thousands of years. The coincidence of the impact with ongoing volcanic activity in the Deccan Traps of India created a double catastrophe that amplified the environmental effects far beyond what either event might have caused individually. The Deccan Traps eruptions, which had been occurring sporadically for hundreds of thousands of years, intensified dramatically in response to the seismic triggering from the impact. These massive flood basalt eruptions released enormous quantities of lava, ash, and toxic gases into the atmosphere, adding to the environmental pollution already caused by the impact itself. The volcanic emissions included sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and other compounds that affected both local and global climate systems. Volcanic activity was triggered at numerous sites around the Pacific Ring of Fire, as seismic waves from the impact activated fault systems connected to magma chambers. Volcanoes in Indonesia, Japan, and the Western Americas experienced increased activity levels that would persist for years after the initial impact. These secondary eruptions created additional atmospheric pollution and contributed to the prolonged environmental crisis. The combination of impact debris and volcanic ash created atmospheric conditions unprecedented in Earth's history. The particulate load in the atmosphere reached levels that blocked sunlight more effectively than either source could have achieved alone. Volcanic gases, particularly sulfur compounds, reacted with water vapor to create acid rain that was more intense and longer lasting than would have resulted from the impact alone. The dual catastrophe of impact and volcanism created environmental conditions that made recovery virtually impossible for most large organisms. While the immediate effects of the impact were devastating, the prolonged volcanic activity ensured that environmental conditions would remain hostile for years or decades after the initial event. This sustained environmental stress would prove to be the final factor that pushed most dinosaur species beyond their ability to adapt and survive. Chapters 41-50. The Long Death. Chapter 41. Nuclear winter begins. The combination of dust, debris, and smoke particles suspended in Earth's atmosphere created conditions resembling a nuclear winter that would persist for months after the initial impact. This prolonged period of darkness and cold represented the beginning of the most challenging phase of the extinction event, as surviving organisms faced an environment fundamentally different from anything their species had experienced during millions of years of evolution. Surface temperatures plummeted as incoming solar radiation was blocked by the dense particulate cloud that now enveloped the entire planet. Regions that had enjoyed tropical warmth for millions of years experienced near-freezing temperatures, while areas closer to the poles became locked in perpetual winter conditions. The temperature drop occurred rapidly within weeks of the impact, giving organisms little time to adapt to the dramatically altered climate conditions. The darkness was perhaps even more devastating than the cold. Light levels at Earth's surface dropped to less than 1% of normal solar illumination, creating twilight conditions even during what should have been the brightest hours of the day. This reduction in available light effectively shut down photosynthesis across the planet, eliminating the primary source of energy for most terrestrial ecosystems and beginning the collapse of food webs from the bottom up. Atmospheric circulation patterns were disrupted by the temperature differences between the debris-laden upper atmosphere and the cooling surface, creating chaotic weather systems with unpredictable storms, unusual precipitation patterns, and violent wind events. These weather disturbances made survival even more difficult for organisms already struggling with the effects of darkness and cold, while also spreading the atmospheric contamination to regions that might otherwise have experienced less severe effects. The psychological and physiological stress of living in perpetual twilight affected animal behavior in profound ways. Species that had evolved sophisticated daily and seasonal rhythms found their biological clocks disrupted by the absence of normal light cycles. Migratory patterns became confused as traditional environmental cues disappeared, while predator-prey relationships were altered by the changed visibility conditions. The nuclear winter had begun, and its effects would persist far longer than the immediate destruction caused by the impact itself, creating a prolonged period of environmental stress that would test the survival capabilities of every remaining species on Earth. Chapter 42. Photosynthesis stops. The dramatic reduction in available sunlight brought photosynthesis to a virtual standstill across the planet, cutting off the primary source of energy that supported virtually all terrestrial life. This shutdown of the biological processes that had sustained ecosystems for millions of years marked the beginning of a catastrophic collapse that would work its way up through every level of the food web, ultimately affecting even the largest predators. Plants that had thrived in the stable, warm conditions of the late Cretaceous found themselves unable to produce the sugars and starches that fueled their growth and reproduction. Coniferous forests that had dominated landscapes for millions of years began showing signs of stress within days of the impact, as their needle-covered branches could no longer capture sufficient light to maintain basic metabolic processes. Deciduous trees fared slightly better initially, but even they could not survive prolonged periods without adequate illumination. The cessation of photosynthesis had immediate effects on atmospheric composition, as plants could no longer absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen at their normal rates. This disruption of the planet's gas exchange systems contributed to changes in air quality that affected the respiratory efficiency of surviving animals. The delicate balance between oxygen production and consumption that had remained stable throughout the Mesozoic era was suddenly disrupted, creating additional stress for organisms already struggling with other environmental changes. Smaller plants and understory vegetation died first, as they were already adapted to lower light conditions and had less energy reserves to sustain them through the prolonged darkness. Ferns, mosses, and flowering plants that formed the base of many terrestrial food webs withered and died within weeks of the impact, eliminating crucial food sources for herbivorous dinosaurs and smaller animals that depended on these plants for nutrition. The collapse of plant communities created cascading effects throughout ecosystems worldwide. Insects that depended on flowering plants for nectar and pollen faced immediate starvation, while seed-eating animals lost their primary food sources. The failure of photosynthesis represented more than just the death of individual plants. It marked the breakdown of the fundamental energy transfer process that connected solar radiation to biological systems, effectively severing the link between Earth's life and its primary energy source. Chapter 43. Food Chains Collapse. The failure of photosynthesis initiated a catastrophic collapse of food chains that had remained stable for millions of years, as the energy flow from primary producers to higher-level consumers was abruptly severed. This collapse proceeded in a predictable sequence, beginning with the smallest organisms and working its way up to the largest predators. But the speed and completeness of the breakdown was unlike anything in Earth's previous history. Herbivorous dinosaurs faced immediate starvation as their plant food sources withered and died in the prolonged darkness. Massive sauropods that had required hundreds of pounds of vegetation daily to sustain their enormous bulk found themselves in landscapes where edible plants had become increasingly scarce. These gentle giants, which had dominated terrestrial ecosystems for over 100 million years, began dying of malnutrition as their digestive systems evolved to process specific types of plant material could not adapt quickly enough to alternative food sources. Smaller herbivorous species initially showed greater resilience due to their lower caloric requirements and more flexible feeding strategies. Duck-billed dinosaurs and ceratopsians could survive longer on stored body fat and by consuming bark, roots, and other plant materials that were less affected by the light reduction. However, even these adaptable species eventually succumbed as the prolonged environmental stress depleted all available plant resources and weakened their immune systems. The collapse of herbivore populations created cascading effects for carnivorous dinosaurs that had evolved to prey on these plant eaters. Tyrannosaurus rex and other large predators found their traditional prey species becoming increasingly scarce, forcing them to compete more intensively for the remaining food sources. Some predators may have temporarily benefited from the abundance of carrion created by mass die-offs, but this resource was finite and could not sustain carnivore populations indefinitely. Scavenging became increasingly important as fresh kills became rare, leading to increased competition between different carnivorous species for access to carcasses. Some predators may have resorted to cannibalism as their preferred prey species disappeared, though this behavior could only provide temporary relief from starvation. The breakdown of established predator-prey relationships created chaos in ecosystems where stability had persisted for millions of years as organisms struggled to adapt to rapidly changing resource availability and competition pressures. Chapter 44: Acid Rain. The massive injection of sulfur compounds into the atmosphere from both the impact and triggered volcanic activity created acid precipitation of unprecedented intensity and duration. This chemical assault on terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems represented another layer of environmental stress that compounded the effects of darkness, cold, and food scarcity already challenging surviving organisms across the globe. Sulfur dioxide released from the vaporized limestone bedrock at the impact site reacted with atmospheric water vapor to form sulfuric acid droplets that fell as highly acidic rain, with pH levels potentially dropping below 3 in some regions. This level of acidity was sufficient to damage or kill vegetation directly, while also leaching essential nutrients from soils and contaminating freshwater sources that surviving animals depended upon for drinking water. The acid precipitation had particularly severe effects on aquatic ecosystems, where pH changes could kill fish, amphibians, and aquatic invertebrates within days of exposure. Lakes and rivers that had supported diverse communities of organisms for millions of years became sterile bodies of water incapable of supporting life. Marine environments also experienced acidification, though the buffering capacity of seawater provided some protection against the most extreme pH changes. Plant communities already stressed by lack of sunlight faced additional damage from acid rain that burned their leaves and disrupted their ability to absorb nutrients from contaminated soils. Coniferous trees, which were already struggling with the reduced light conditions, proved particularly vulnerable to acid damage as their needle-like leaves provided large surface areas for acid exposure. Many forest communities that might have survived the darkness alone were killed by the combination of light reduction and chemical damage. The contamination of freshwater sources created severe challenges for surviving land animals, as many streams, ponds, and lakes became too acidic to drink safely. Animals that had evolved sophisticated behaviors for locating and accessing water sources found their traditional drinking sites transformed into toxic hazards. Some species may have been forced to travel much greater distances to find suitable water, expending precious energy reserves and increasing their vulnerability to predation and environmental stress. The acid rain represented yet another factor in the complex web of environmental changes that made survival increasingly difficult for the remaining members of dinosaur communities. Chapter 45: Oxygen Depletion. The collapse of photosynthetic systems across the planet led to significant changes in atmospheric oxygen levels, creating respiratory challenges for surviving organisms that were already struggling with multiple environmental stresses. While the effects developed gradually over months rather than days, the reduction in available oxygen added another layer of physiological stress that particularly affected large, active animals with high metabolic requirements. The cessation of oxygen production by dying plant communities meant that atmospheric oxygen levels began declining as respiration by surviving organisms continued consuming the available supply. This gradual depletion was most noticeable in enclosed or poorly ventilated environments where air circulation was limited, but even open areas experienced measurable reductions in oxygen concentration as the global balance between oxygen production and consumption shifted dramatically. Large dinosaurs with high metabolic rates were among the first to experience the effects of reduced oxygen availability. Massive predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, which had evolved to pursue prey in short, intense bursts of activity, found their stamina and endurance significantly reduced by the declining oxygen levels. Similarly, large herbivorous dinosaurs that had previously been able to migrate long distances in search of food discovered that their reduced respiratory efficiency limited their ability to travel between feeding areas. The oxygen depletion effects were compounded by the stress responses that surviving organisms were already experiencing due to starvation, temperature changes, and habitat disruption. Animals under severe stress require more oxygen to maintain basic physiological functions, but the environmental conditions were making less oxygen available precisely when it was most needed. This created a negative feedback loop that accelerated the decline of organisms already pushed to their physiological limits. Smaller animals and those with more efficient respiratory systems showed greater resilience to the oxygen depletion, though even they were affected by the changed atmospheric conditions. Birds, which had evolved highly efficient respiratory systems for flight, possessed some advantages in the oxygen-depleted environment, contributing to their eventual survival through the extinction event. The gradual nature of oxygen depletion meant that it was often not the direct cause of death, but rather a contributing factor that weakened organisms and made them more susceptible to other environmental stresses, disease, and predation pressures. Chapter 46. Mass starvation. As the environmental catastrophe entered its third and fourth months after the impact, mass starvation became the primary cause of death for surviving dinosaur populations worldwide. The complete breakdown of food webs, combined with the continued scarcity of plant resources and the depletion of carrion from earlier die-offs, created conditions where even the most adaptable species could no longer find sufficient nutrition to survive. The starvation process was particularly cruel for the largest dinosaur species, which had evolved enormous body sizes that required constant feeding to maintain their metabolic needs. Massive sauropods that had once consumed several tons of vegetation daily found themselves in landscapes completely barren of suitable plant material. Their enormous digestive systems, evolved over millions of years to process specific types of plant fiber, could not adapt quickly enough to alternative food sources, even when such alternatives were available. Carnivorous dinosaurs faced equally devastating challenges as their prey species disappeared through starvation and environmental stress. The abundance of carrion that had temporarily sustained some predator populations during the first months after impact was now exhausted, forcing these hunters to compete intensively for the few remaining live prey animals. Many predators were forced to attempt hunting species they had never targeted before, often unsuccessfully due to their specialized hunting adaptation. The starvation process was slow and agonizing, with animals gradually losing body condition over weeks or months before finally succumbing to malnutrition. Reproductive activities ceased entirely as organisms redirected all available energy toward basic survival functions. Parental care behaviors broke down as adults could no longer afford the energy expenditure required to care for offspring, leading to the abandonment of eggs and young that had no chance of survival in the hostile environment. Social structures within dinosaur communities collapsed as starvation drove individuals to compete desperately for any remaining food resources. Herding behaviors that had provided protection and foraging advantages for millions of years became liabilities as large groups quickly exhausted local food supplies. The bonds that had held dinosaur societies together were broken by the basic drive for individual survival, creating a world where cooperation was replaced by desperate competition for the meager resources that remained in the devastated ecosystems. Chapter 47. Small survivors. While the majority of dinosaur species faced extinction during the prolonged environmental catastrophe, certain small organisms demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability that would allow them to survive the crisis and eventually repopulate the devastated planet. These survivors possessed specific characteristics that proved advantageous under the extreme conditions created by the impact and its aftermath. Small mammals, which had remained relatively inconspicuous throughout the age of dinosaurs, found themselves surprisingly well suited to survival in the post-impact world. Their small body size meant they required less food to maintain their metabolic needs, allowing them to survive on resources that were insufficient for larger organisms. Many mammal species were already adapted to nocturnal lifestyles, giving them advantages in the perpetually dim conditions that followed the impact. Birds, which were actually small dinosaurs themselves, possessed several crucial adaptations that enhanced their survival prospects. Their highly efficient respiratory systems allowed them to function better than other vertebrates in the oxygen-depleted atmosphere, while their ability to fly enabled them to search for food resources across wide areas and escape localized environmental hazards. Some bird species had already evolved seed-eating capabilities that proved valuable when plant material became scarce. Aquatic organisms in freshwater and marine environments showed mixed survival patterns depending on their specific ecological requirements and geographic locations. Some fish species survived in deeper waters where temperature changes were less severe and where organic matter settling from surface die-offs provided temporary food sources. Marine invertebrates with the ability to enter dormant states or survive on minimal nutrition showed higher survival rates than more metabolically active species. Insects and other arthropods demonstrated exceptional survival capabilities due to their small size, short generation times, and diverse feeding strategies. Many insect species could survive on decaying organic matter that was abundant in the aftermath of the mass die-offs, while their rapid reproductive cycles allowed populations to recover quickly when environmental conditions began to improve. Some insects had evolved the ability to enter diapause or other dormant states that allowed them to wait out the worst environmental conditions. These small survivors would form the foundation for the recovery of life on Earth after the extinction event, eventually diversifying and evolving to fill the ecological niches left vacant by the extinct dinosaurs and other large organisms. Chapter 48. Recovery begins. Approximately 6 months after the asteroid impact, the first tentative signs of environmental recovery began to appear as the dense atmospheric debris cloud gradually settled and dissipated. Sunlight levels, while still far below normal, began to increase sufficiently to allow the resumption of limited photosynthetic activity in the most resilient plant species, marking the beginning of a slow ecological recovery process that would continue for thousands of years. The initial recovery was patchy and irregular, with some geographic regions showing signs of improvement, while others remained devastated by the continued effects of environmental contamination and habitat destruction. Coastal areas and river valleys, which had received deposits of nutrient-rich sediments from the massive erosion following the impact, often showed the first signs of new plant growth. Ferns and other spore-producing plants were among the earliest colonizers, as their reproductive strategies proved particularly well-suited to the disturbed environmental conditions. Temperature conditions began stabilizing as the atmospheric dust load decreased and normal solar heating patterns gradually resumed. However, the climate remained significantly different from pre-impact conditions, with more variable weather patterns and seasonal temperature swings that reflected the disrupted atmospheric circulation systems. Many regions experienced a transition period of several years before achieving relatively stable climate conditions. The surviving animal populations faced new challenges during the recovery phase as they attempted to exploit the slowly improving environmental conditions. Competition for the limited food resources remained intense, while many traditional habitat types had been permanently altered by the catastrophic events. Some survivor species began expanding their geographic ranges as transportation barriers created by the impact effects gradually disappeared. Freshwater systems showed some of the earliest signs of biological recovery as acid rain effects diminished and normal precipitation patterns began to resume. Aquatic organisms that had survived in refugia began recolonizing damaged water bodies, while terrestrial animals gained renewed access to safe drinking water supplies. The recovery of freshwater ecosystems provided crucial stepping stones for the broader ecological recovery that would eventually transform the post-impact world into thriving new ecosystems adapted to the changed environmental conditions. Chapter 49. New ecosystems emerge. As environmental conditions continued improving over the years and decades following the impact, entirely new types of ecosystems began emerging in the transformed landscape. These novel ecological communities differed dramatically from the dinosaur-dominated systems of the Mesozoic Era, as the surviving species evolved new relationships and filled ecological roles that had been vacant since the mass extinction event. Mammalian species, no longer constrained by competition with large dinosaurs, began diversifying rapidly into ecological niches that had been unavailable to them throughout the Mesozoic Era. Small insectivorous mammals evolved into larger forms that could exploit the abundant invertebrate populations thriving on decomposing organic matter. Some lineages developed herbivorous adaptations that allowed them to take advantage of the recovering plant communities, while others evolved predatory specializations for hunting other mammals and surviving reptiles. Plant communities also underwent dramatic changes as they adapted to the altered environmental conditions and the absence of large herbivorous dinosaurs. Without the constant browsing pressure from massive sauropods and other plant eaters, vegetation communities developed different structural characteristics and species compositions. Flowering plants, which had been expanding their range during the late Cretaceous, accelerated their diversification and began dominating many terrestrial ecosystems. The surviving bird species, as the only remaining dinosaur lineage, began expanding into ecological roles previously filled by their extinct relatives. Some birds evolved larger body sizes and terrestrial habits that allowed them to function as ground-dwelling predators and scavengers, while others developed specialized feeding relationships with the newly diversifying mammal populations. The coevolution between birds and mammals would become a defining characteristic of post-extinction ecosystems. Marine ecosystems experienced their own transformations as surviving species adapted to fill the roles previously occupied by extinct marine reptiles and other organisms. New predator-prey relationships developed as the surviving fish, marine invertebrates, and other aquatic organisms evolved to exploit the changed oceanic conditions. The recovery of marine productivity provided resources that supported the gradual recovery of coastal and terrestrial ecosystems through nutrient cycling and food web connections that linked aquatic and terrestrial environments. Chapter 50, Legacy of Extinction. The asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs 66 million years ago created a legacy that continues to shape life on Earth today, demonstrating how single catastrophic events can redirect the entire course of evolutionary history. The extinction of non-avian dinosaurs opened ecological opportunities that allowed mammals to diversify and eventually produce the complex ecosystems and intelligent species that characterize our modern world. The survival of small dinosaurs that we now call birds ensured that dinosaur lineages continued beyond the mass extinction, though in dramatically different forms than their Mesozoic ancestors. Modern birds retain many characteristics of their dinosaur heritage, including sophisticated behaviors, complex social systems, and remarkable adaptability that helped their ancestors survive the post-impact environmental crisis. The success of birds in virtually every ecosystem on Earth demonstrates the evolutionary potential that remained within the dinosaur lineage. Mammalian evolution accelerated dramatically following the extinction of large dinosaurs, leading to the development of diverse lineages that would eventually include primates, cetaceans, elephants, and countless other species that define modern terrestrial ecosystems. Without the competitive pressure from dominant reptilian herbivores and carnivores, mammals were able to explore ecological strategies and achieve body sizes that had been impossible during the age of dinosaurs. This mammalian radiation would eventually lead to the evolution of humans, whose existence is directly connected to the extinction event that ended dinosaur dominance. The flowering plants that had begun diversifying during the late Cretaceous experienced explosive evolution following the extinction as they faced reduced herbivore pressure and new pollination opportunities with surviving insects and emerging bird species. These angiosperms would come to dominate terrestrial ecosystems, creating the diverse plant communities that support modern biodiversity and provide the foundation for contemporary food webs. The impact event itself left permanent geological evidence that continues to provide insights into catastrophic processes and their effects on biological systems. The study of the Chicxulub crater and associated impact deposits has revolutionized our understanding of how cosmic events can influence planetary evolution, while also providing sobering perspectives on the vulnerability of complex life to external catastrophes. This research has informed modern discussions about asteroid detection and planetary defense strategies. Ocean ecosystems underwent fundamental reorganization following the extinction, with surviving marine organisms evolving to fill niches previously occupied by marine reptiles and other extinct groups. The recovery of marine productivity took millions of years, but ultimately produced the diverse oceanic ecosystems that support modern fisheries and regulate global climate patterns through carbon cycling and heat distribution. Perhaps most importantly, the dinosaur extinction demonstrates both the fragility and resilience of life on Earth. While the catastrophe eliminated dominant species that had thrived for over 100 million years, it also revealed life's remarkable ability to recover, adapt, and diversify in the aftermath of even the most severe environmental challenges. This legacy reminds us that extinction and renewal are fundamental aspects of evolutionary processes, and that the history of life on our planet has always been shaped by the interplay between stability and catastrophic change that continues to influence our world today, serving as both a warning about the potential consequences of global environmental disruption and a testament to the extraordinary capacity of life to endure and flourish even under the most challenging circumstances.